Hi, welcome to How to Be a Human Leader with Always Your Job. We're here to chat about human leadership in a way that's real and relatable, tackling work-life challenges, and offer practical advice to navigate tough decisions. Whether you're leading a team or navigating your own career, we got you covered. I'm Roberto Torres, a startup engineer leader, and with me is Chris Ollerkin, a Fortune 100 IT leader. We'll dive into the real world stuff, share experiences, and offer guidance on leading with compassion while keeping your career on track. Today, we will discuss how do you train to become a humane leader. Hi, Chris. How
Good
are you?
morning. Good morning, Roberto. We've both done a lot of training to become humane leaders, haven't we?
Yes, we have indeed. And I don't think there is a college nor a university that teaches humane leadership 101, is it?
Not, maybe not by that title exactly. No, they probably don't. However, I would say there certainly are some good leadership classes. There are some bad leadership classes. But I'm thinking more about, how when you're training, you may go to a leadership class. Let's say you go to some leadership class that's going to teach you how to give feedback in a good structured way that's helpful or something like that. And one of the things that I found coming back from any kind of training is you're overly excited to use it. So let's say they teach you four or five different techniques of various things of leadership, and man, all of a sudden you're machine gunning that stuff out at your team. It's a
Hmm.
bit overwhelming for them, right? Because you're all excited about being a humane leader. Maybe it's your first role as a leader, and you're excited to use this stuff. And I want to caution you to pick one thing at a time and try it out. Don't machine gun out all this advice you went to training and learned, and don't do it all at once, because one, you won't be able to tell what's working and what's not, right? If you spread a lot of things out there, maybe a lot of different things happen at once, and you're like, well, what worked and what didn't? What made some people happier and more productive? What made some people unhappy and less productive? You won't know for sure because you tried so many different things at one time. So I like to come back from training with a list of things I want to implement, and I prioritize them, and I start with one thing at a time and try that for a while and try and improve my technique. So just as an example, you know you want to be able to give constructive feedback, and some people talk about the constructive feedback sandwich, right? You compliment them. Roberto, you're really doing great on this, but you need to work a lot harder on this, but keep up the good work on that other thing because that's working great. Well, personally, I found that sometimes when you do the sandwich, they forget the middle part.
Hmm.
They remember the two good things,
Yeah.
and they don't remember the corrective action that you wanted them to improve on that thing in the middle of the sandwich. So I think you can try those kinds of things, right? But if it's not working, you may find that sometimes addressing a single topic, staying just on that topic, don't beat it to death, short and sweet. Roberto, you're doing well. We can start off with a hey, how you doing? Good. Things are going well. But listen, I really need you to get um, that database up and running at midnight every night. We can't let that drag into 2 or 3 a.m. because some of our European customers are complaining, right? We got to stick to the schedule. So please work on that harder and end it with that. Now, one topic. Roberto's not going to forget that he needs this corrective action because he remembers the two wonderful things that he did about answering his pager right away or answering his cell phone right away at night when he's on call. You don't sandwich that. So I think that, when you come back from a class, you can prioritize all the great things you learned, but pick one and try and see what works, and wait for some feedback. Wait for some feedback yourself.
Sure. And two things. The first one is when you tell your team, oh, next week I'm going to be in a training course and etc. You might say, I'm excited, and they might say, oh, I'm scared. But well,
Yep. Exactly, because they know you're going to come back and try and change how they're doing things, and
Yeah.
even if it's not a per se a manager kind of class, it could be, let's call you're in the phase of managerial where you're kind of still technical and transitioning out of technical into leadership. It could be both, but because now that you're the team leader and you're going to do something technical and they're not going to the training, they're going to be jealous, and now you're going to be trying to steer more things. So you do have to balance that, right? Your team, just like you have to learn the techniques, your team has to adjust to you giving them this new advice. And again, I found that initially my excitement of things is not matched by the team's excitement to receive it.
Yes, because there are many people who doesn't get well, or excuse me, who doesn't embrace change as it should be. But understand that changes are often. I totally agree. You get in your you have such stamina with all these changes that are going to happen, and they might see it different. But okay, right now you mentioned about training course, but I think that a humiliator also trains when that humiliator observes something within the company that it could be either in your team or in another team when they faced maybe a difficult situation and how they managed to overcome it or they failed actually. So I think that also humility is the one who watches, observes, analyzes, and understands which good things would bring this benefit for himself or herself as well, and the ones that shouldn't be used by them.
Absolutely. That power of observation, a humane leader, not only, we've talked many times, right, reflects on our own actions, but a humane leader can learn even more by that observation of what the other leaders are doing and can be more objective about what's working and failing, right? Because it's not them. So
Yes.
really paying attention, how a leadership, like if you're at a town hall, how does the senior most leader relate to the entire audience of your town hall meeting versus the next level down of leaders? How do they work when they're addressing maybe a smaller group? Let's suppose a town hall's 200 people, but then the next level meeting, a more junior executive, then he's addressing 50 people. And then the next junior executive, she's addressing 25 people. Observe how they interact with them. Is there a style of how maybe they start off more formal at the beginning and then they get a little more casual and relaxed once they're up there? Is it better that they're relaxed the entire time and they're more informal the entire presentation? What it works with your company's culture? Observe that and try and use some of those same techniques maybe when you're in similar situations. So in other words, you get an opportunity to present to the whole town hall, and your leadership that does presentations at that town hall level, they're very serious. No jokes, no casual presentation. Stay on topic, present exactly what's on the slides. Well, then you should do the same. Don't try and break the mold until you're much more senior in the company. If you're the junior new leader, you need to follow the protocol. Don't you can make waves if you want and go against the current, but I don't recommend it. A humane leader can be more effective sometimes swimming with the current and make subtle changes over time versus swimming against the current and trying to make a radical change in how the culture is.
Yes, actually. And also, really, really important, something that worked for another team might not work for you. So you have to have the context, you have to understand their situation and do hypothesis and ask you, what if, you know? And from that what if that question is so powerful that will allow you to ask the question and begin creating some scenarios in which you are training yourself. So you might say, okay, I have this question, I'm going with scenario A, and maybe you apply it. It is not a big change, it's something mild, and you will observe and you will determine if that change, it was something that was powerful, that made the change that you wanted, the outcome. If it didn't, well, it's a learning for yourself, because the training, it is not always like a matrix blue or red pill. If you swallow the red pill, you're going to get all the knowledge. No, it's an ongoing training, ongoing process. So if scenario A doesn't work, go with scenario B. And if you have um, in your mind that each different letter might be a different scenario that you could apply and train yourself, there is up to from A to Z. So there are many scenarios that you could do, right?
Absolutely. And, because it's one thing to learn from a book. Maybe you read a book, maybe you go to the class. Like I said, it's the training part is really practicing that delivery of those scenarios. So you do your scenario one, and maybe it doesn't work the first time. You can change up how you use and let's use the feedback, stay with the feedback example, right? All right, so you took part of the sandwich out. You complimented them. You tell them about the corrective action, and then you end the conversation, right? Much more focused. Hopefully, they dwell on that ending part of the corrective action and an improvement that you're hoping for. But it doesn't work. All right, maybe I need to change up the delivery a little bit. You could still have the compliment at the beginning, but maybe it's on something more minor, whereas the corrective action is on something much more serious. Maybe your initial compliment was about something that was very serious, so they stayed focused on that big success. Roberto, that $1 million project you did was awesome. Fantastic. But I really need you to work on getting that database online at midnight, exactly as planned, not at 2 a.m., because our European customers are not happy. You're going to walk away, man, he's so happy with my multi-million-dollar project. Okay, so maybe I need to compliment you on, hey, good work at that last team meeting in terms of explaining the project goals. But we really got to work on this database and getting it online at midnight. We've got hundreds of thousands of European customers. We got over 50 complaints last week about it. It's now reached the vice president, and he's calling me every time that database is down. We need to so we're spending more time on the corrective action part. So you experiment with some of these things. This is how a leader trains. You actually have to be conscious that you're trying different techniques and you're observing the results. That's what a humane leader does, is you're trying to be very humane in some things that sometimes are not always welcome by the person who's receiving it, right? In general, a lot of people are not interested in hearing corrective feedback or corrective action to improve their performance. A lot of people don't. But as the humane leader, that's your job. And if you want to be a humane leader, you've got to be really good about coaching for success and correcting these problems that are, maybe detrimental, right? They're not going to help this person's career. So you're trying to be humane. You want Roberto to be as successful as possible. But Roberto needs to make sure he hears that correction. And if you sandwich it, he likely won't. If you use too big of a compliment at the beginning, Roberto will focus on the big compliment. So you have to kind of see what works for you. And again, for what comes out of my mouth, you cannot exactly do the same thing, right? Because maybe your delivery is a little bit different. Maybe your tone of voice is different. Maybe your relationship with the team member is different. So the humane leader takes all these different things into account. And one of the key things you said was they're You're waiting for feedback. You're observing to see what is the reaction and outcome. That is really important, because if we just give the corrective feedback and don't really pay attention to, look, I did it different this time than last time, and the result was different, well, you haven't really actually learned anything.
Yeah, indeed. And you say it was a key, it is a key. What you learn. The thing is, what you learn, I think that is the most important thing over here. It's not how do you apply that knowledge. It is what you learn. Did you make it right? Did you make it wrong? Did your assumption were correct or weren't? The thing is that knowledge will accompany you for many, well, for all your life. Also, one thing that's really important, and I deviate a little bit, is the willingness to learn. If you want to train yourselves, this is not, you have maybe the easy way to get this knowledge. You might have it a different, it might be maybe the hardest, no? Maybe based on your personal life, maybe on the work life, but it is. But I think that there are intrinsic motivations and extrinsic motivations that will allow you to train yourself to be a human leader, to be a human leader. And the thing is, extrinsic motivations might be, hey, there is a bonus who are given to certain kind of people within the company. Well, I want to have that bonus. Well, that is an extrinsic motivation. But an intrinsic motivation is how could I be better? How do I identify myself as a human leader and be, I don't know if you could say more of a humane leader, but more humane to myself and to my team. What can I do? And that is, I believe, the strongest and fiercest motivation that a humane leader should have. If you can manage and balance those kind of motivations, intrinsic and extrinsic, you're going to be on a roll, man. Actually.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that training aspect of it is realizing too that you may not be a humane leader 100% of the time, right? It's train yourself to think before you react, think before you speak, so that you are training yourself to evaluate what's going on and then say, all right, on the one hand, I'm really angry that Roberto once again didn't get that. I'm sorry to blame you all the time, but once again did not get that database back online in the maintenance window. Now the CEO is going to call me again. All right, I'm really angry. But the humane leader will then say, I want to be a better humane leader. And my training is I'm not going to overreact. I am not going to explode, even though right now it's 2 a.m. and the CEO is calling me, woke me up out of sleep to complain, and I'm really upset. But my humane leadership says, look, Roberto knows how to do this. He's doing it as fast as he can. For me to call and correct Roberto while I'm really upset is not good. Instead, I will address it at an appropriate time. I will be calm. I will not do the sandwich to make sure that Roberto isn't missing the corrective action between two compliments. And I will talk about the importance. All right, this time I'm going to do something different. I'm going to talk about the economics of this outage. You know, we've lost some customers. Roberto, this has been, so maybe, maybe Roberto needs to hear more about the economic impact to the company. Maybe that will help Roberto see the importance. Maybe there was somehow I was communicating it and it was like, get it done at midnight, get it done at 2 a.m. It's in the middle of the night. Who cares? Oh, there's $4 million of customers left in the last month. Oh, Roberto's very aware of economics. That's kind of his space. As a humane leader, I use that to help motivate Roberto to improve. So those kinds of things are training too, is to not just make a snap decision. Don't become a boss when your adrenaline is high because the CEO is calling you. Be a humane leader and practice that clear communication, calm, reflective. I'm trying to help you, Roberto. Let me explain the consequences of some of the things that maybe you were not aware of. The sales team lost 3 customers. 2 have, are threatening to leave. It's this percentage of the business. Those are the things that a humane leader reflects on and realizes probably 2:30 a.m. is not the time for me to correct Roberto on this.
Yeah, uh, you nailed it. And also one thing, is when you mentioned Roberto all these times, I said, "Oh, did I did something bad?" But no. Um, One thing is also you mentioned in this example of the database that it has to be done at a certain hour. Well, that is why there are certain phrases that has to be done. EOD, end of day, EOW, end of week. It has to be done. You cannot allow your feelings to say, "Oh, Roberto is asking me to do it maybe a couple of hours." No, there is an importance. So it has to be done, even though that person might say no or try to say, "No, I don't want to know." It has to be done. That's why the humiliator, it doesn't changes to being a humiliator, but understands the outcomes that has to be done, the goals that we have to meet. So we stick to that and tell them. In this training, when bad types happen, we learn a lot from that kind of situations rather than a book, which is always the same. And in this kind of situations, it might change, but you will react wisely.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always learned the most from my biggest failures
Failures?
or errors. So those have always been the things I learned the most from. What I hope is our humane leaders don't make too many errors and, get yourself into too much trouble, but realize that those challenges, the problems, the person who needs the corrective action, the team that is not delivering on time, that's where you're going to learn the best leadership because it's so challenging. So when you're training, don't generally don't try and train on the things that are the easiest. Train on the things that are hard. Maybe not the hardest one first, but you know, to give a performance review to the very best team member you've got, you're not going to train much with that. You're not going to learn much from giving the easiest performance review to your number one top leader or performer that does everything perfect. So
Mhm,
maybe
mhm.
start with the average performer and work your way up to dealing with the performer who significantly needs to change their performance. But
Yeah,
again,
indeed.
incremental, do a little bit at a time and realize it's training. You are not going to get it right the first time. Maybe not
Yeah,
even the second or third. Keep trying.
yeah, indeed. That's why one of my philosophies is fail often, fail smart. When you fail and you learn from that, you fail smart. Well, then you move to the next step on the ladder of knowledge. And that is an ongoing, that is a cycle that runs in life.
Yes, absolutely. And it takes time. So the 30-year old is going to approach it different than the 40-year-old, than the 50-year-old, than the 60-year-old. Why? Because they have life experience. So sometimes our humane leaders just need to give it some time because they got to have some life.
Indeed, indeed. Well, great. It was a really good topic. We're closing this year's episodes. We will have a a new one, and the last one next week. But I will see you then.
See you next year.
Next year? Oh, next year.
Is it next year, right? I'm looking at the calendar. Wouldn't it be next year? We'll see you next year.
Right. So next year it shall be. Got it. Well, it was an amazing ride for this year, Trace. Everything in this podcast. And we have new challenges and new knowledge to share with our audience for the following year in 2026.
We'll see you in 2026.
Got it. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.